well. My husband and I have been married for a couple of years and was trying to conceive, and I went to my OB-GYN at the time, which was Dr. Hirschman, and we kind of talked to him about my medical history. I've had several myomectomies and laparoscopies, and he said that, if you aren't able to conceive in about 6 months, we'll probably need to refer you to a specialist. And 6 months passed, we were still unable to conceive, so that's how we were referred to Dr. Goldstein's office. The first visit was excellent. He has such a great bedside manner, which I guess is really tableside manner, but my husband and I, we came in, he had some preliminary information on us, asked us several questions, and really sat down and kind of talked to us about what our options were and how he thought he could be helpful. Was really concerned about what we wanted to have a good understanding of what our expectations were, what we thought was actually going to occur during this process, and took a lot of time to really explain everything. And I always ask, do you understand that? Do you have any questions? And just seemed very, very sincere, very, very sincere about what he does. Very thorough, very, very, very thorough. Did not leave the visit feeling confused. He encouraged us to read our booklet of information, and if we had questions, to call back. It was not you come in and, okay, this is what we're going to do, and he assumes you're ready to start. He wants to make sure that you thoroughly understand and you have time to think about it and call with questions. And we really appreciated that because we didn't feel like it was pressure or anything like that. Well, we started working with Dr. Goldstein in February, and we were pregnant by August. But then I had I wasn't the usual and customary patient, I think, because we had a couple of little blips, again, because of my medical history, so we got off track. Well, I think our first major challenge, you come in and you do a workup for me and my husband, and I had this thing called, they tested my FSH level, and I never heard of that. I didn't know what it was, but obviously it's an indicator of the vitality, usefulness of your eggs, and my level was way high, which I was very surprised because I knew due to my past surgeries that my tubes were blocked. So we were just under the assumption that tubes were blocked. How do you work around that? Retrieve the eggs and move forward. But once we completed our first initial workup, that's when I was notified that your level is very, very high, which is really out of the range for eggs that we would try to retrieve and then use for implantation. And I can tell you, when he told me that, when I came to see him that day, my husband wasn't able to come with me. So I walk into the office and he just said, well, have you had your FSH level tested before? No. And I immediately knew something was kind of wrong. I was like, oh, I feel like I really need my husband here, which I knew that couldn't happen. But he sat really close to me, pulled up close to me and put his hand on my hand. So then I knew he was going to probably tell me something that I didn't want to hear. And he told me that it was very high and outside of the range they would normally use. And that was that. I mean, all I could do was cry. I just, you go in thinking, oh, my tubes are blocked. They'll figure out a way to get the eggs out, put it together with my husband's sperm, and, implant and move forward. And so he, just put his hand on my hand, let me cry, gave me tissue, talked to me a little bit about that process, allowed me an opportunity to call my husband so I could tell him what was going on. And then he said, you all just need to think about this. There's still an option for you. You can use a donor, which I had never even heard of. And he said, you just need to think about that. We could move forward, but again, your levels are so high that the success rate would be very, very low. So I thought he did a really good job of being realistic yet compassionate about our issue. So, and I was just devastated, absolutely devastated. Was not prepared to hear that, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And I think later that day or the next day, he called me, and just to see how I was doing, and we talked about it, and still cried, and he still said the same thing. He goes, well, we could try your eggs, but the success rate is really low. You might really want to think about a donor. And after the fact, I learned that my husband called Dr. Goldstein and said, my wife is she's devastated. Could you please call and talk to her? Because I had a really, I can't even begin to articulate how I felt when he told me that. And, based on my husband calling him, Dr. Goldstein called me, I think it was later that night. It was after hours, after normal work hours, and talked to me. And I just thought it was very, very nice that he would do something like that. And so I think that's how he helped us to get through that process. And they were patient with us. We probably came in, a couple of weeks later, and he talked to us a little bit more about the process. There's there's a book that you can look at, so you can look at potential donors, kind of walked us through that process, let us sit down and kind of go through that and identify some folks that we were probably interested in an agency that could help us. And it probably took us about 2 months to come to a decision. And periodically, he or Linda would check in with us to see how we were, because, again, I don't think it was as much that we weren't going to do it. It was more about me coming to terms with the fact that this, if we were going to have a child, this is the way I was going to be able to help bring a child into this world. So I felt that they were very compassionate in that process. So we were able to get through that, and we made a decision about who we wanted to use, and the donor, it all turned out fine. She was available, great, young girl. So we're progressing. And we hit another little blip, because I stated that my tubes were blocked, and so we knew that was an issue. So he wanted to go in and kind of do some cleanup work just to make sure that when we got ready to do the transfer, none of my problems would cause any kind of risk for the implantation. So we scheduled a surgery for him to go in and do the cleanup work, and because of my past history, I had a lot of scar tissue. So he couldn't get to anything that he needed to do. So that was another little minor setback that we had. And he talked with us about it and felt that, we could still move further. We had an option where he could have done a more invasive procedure, but that would have taken us off course another 6 to 8 weeks for me to heal. So we opted just to do the best that we could. So he was able to do part of what he had intended to do, but the major thing he wasn't able to. But we felt that we could move forward in a positive way. So I think through those little blips, which probably cost us about 3 months total, he was just very consistent in his compassion and his explanation of what our options were, and very, very supportive and optimistic. Dr. Goldstein just has a great team. Linda is very compassionate, very sincere. I believe she shared a story with me so she can really relate to what we're going through as patients. Again, very thorough. We'll ask questions. We'll call and check up. Even though we went over the calendar with Dr. Goldstein and Linda went over the calendar with me regarding the medications, somehow I still managed to mess that up. But the great thing was that, she was still able to work with me based on the feedback she received from Dr. Goldstein to get me back on track, and to call to make sure that once she realized I was a little confused about keeping everything straight, she would check in with me periodically just to make sure that I had moved to the next level. And I thought that was really nice, because, some people could have just let me get through the whole process and then find out at the end, oh, well, you didn't take any of this right. So it was great that throughout the whole calendar, once the medications really started for me, that she kept me abreast of making sure I was doing what I needed to do. So I had an opportunity when it was time for me to start. I came on my very first day to the office, and Linda actually did the injection for me. And she told me exactly what I needed to do, how to, sterilize the site, fill the syringe, do the injection, dispose of the syringe, and how to keep the medication. So from that point forward, I was able to do that on my own. Then also when I would come in for my checkups, or if she would call, she would ask me how am I doing, how are the injections going. I think one day I ended up taking the injection, maybe it was like 5 hours after the fact, and I was a little concerned because it's very precise. You're supposed to take it around within a 30-minute time frame every day. So I was a little concerned about that, and I called Linda, and she just reassured me. She goes, go ahead and take it, even though you're a little late. Just go ahead and take it now and then get back on schedule the next day. And again, I think she was just always there if we had any questions. I would say most definitely for the woman, if you're waiting, until you're past 35 to begin a family, you definitely need to understand what is going on with you. Understand just your medical history from your family, and then understand the things that you have gone through. I would always encourage women to get their FSH level tested, now that I know what that really means. To really, with your husband or your partner, to really think about, a family, what that means, and if you have to go down that road, what are you really willing to invest? And I don't mean invest money-wise, just emotionally, because this is a very emotional journey. I can't even begin to explain the highs and the lows that you have throughout all of this, and be prepared to what it's going to do to your relationship with your husband, because again, it's very emotional. There's a lot of pressure. There's just, I have to get things right. He has to get things right. If there is a third party, you have to agree upon that. I mean, there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. So, woman, get yourself tested as a couple. Really think about, research what this means, and research who you're actually going to have help you. I felt very comfortable with my OB-GYN and his recommendation, just because we had such a great rapport. But the good thing with Dr. Goldstein is when you come for the first visit, he is really he's on an interview because it's really not us interviewing or him interviewing us as much as we interviewing him, because we could have chosen to go somewhere else. Very sincere, very thorough. He has compassion. He cares. He really cares, and he will listen. And based on what you say, that to me, it triggers how he responds back to you as a couple, and how he develops his plan of action to help you. It was a great experience. I would not have traded it for the world. Even all the blips that we had going along the way, because they really care and really essentially almost hold your hand. I mean, you will and can get through it. And if it's something that you and your husband are really considering, pray about it, ask a lot of questions, but don't be fearful of it. Do not be fearful of the process, because you will get through it. It may take a little while longer, but you'll definitely get through it.